Dr. Mandana Seyfeddinipur, who heads the Endangered Languages Archive, and she will be telling us about the critical role that this digital repository has to play in preserving and publishing endangered languages documentation materials from around the world. So, hand over to you. Thank you very much.
I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to zoom out into the world first, and then I'm going to come back to India. As we are a worldwide archive, we are a worldwide operation. Now, we know modernization is taking place and globalization is taking place, and it has a lot of effects on our world today. And we all know that it has a detrimental effect on our nature. We have managed to kill species, to destroy the habitats, to introduce invasive species, and we know that we have brought nature out of complete balance of regenerating itself. We often see this as if it is, different from what is happening in our world, to our culture and to our diversity, because one of the most amazing features in our world is the biological diversity that we have in the world that is diminishing at a drastic speed. We often see culture as something completely different and removed from it, as if we have control over culture while we don't have control over nature. And we know that, species are going away at an incredible speed, and, biologists are trying to save the bee here and the bee there, but our culture is changing also dramatically at an increasing speed that is threatening and actually quite shocking. My specialty is languages, and what we have today is that half of the world's population speaks 25 languages, and the rest of the world's population, the other 3.5 billion, speak the other, do you know? We think 6,975 languages. So linguists believe that today in the world we have 7,000 languages, and I know you died to read what is written here. Yes, there's Hindi, there's English, there's Chinese in the first place. But what this means is, what we're seeing today is that of the 7,000 languages, every other week one language falls silent. Every other week a last speaker dies somewhere. And by the end of this century, we're estimating 3,500 languages will have been eradicated. And what does this mean? It's not languages that fall silent, right? Languages do not do anything. It's speakers that give up their languages. It's speakers that don't teach their children their languages because they want to ensure a better life for them. People move away because they can't engage in traditional farming anymore. They move away, they move to cities, and they ensure that their child will speak English, will speak Spanish, will speak the major language to have social and economic mobility. This is a very normal process, right? Language is a living medium, and it's the beauty of language that it changes, and that we humans have the ability to adapt language all the time to our changing environment. It's what we linguists study, and it's one of the most fascinating things, and it's the feature of humans that makes us different from all other species, because no other species has language. But what is happening today has never happened before at this increased speed. And what are we losing? What is happening? If you look at this map, you can see all these languages are endangered. These are about 3,500 languages that will be falling silent in the next years. And you can see there's a correlation between plant biological diversity and linguistic diversity. The higher the plant diversity, the higher the linguistic diversity, more languages are there. We think, for example, in the small island of Papua New Guinea that there's 800 languages spoken. It's one of the most diverse places in the world. But in the next 50 years, half of their forests will be eroded. And at the same speed, the languages will go. Now, what do we lose? Well, I think one of the most important things to note, if you think about the graph I showed you, these languages are oral languages. They have not been written. These are not languages that have scripts or have been written down. If we are lucky, there has been an anthropologist or a missionary who has taken some notes and has written down some things about the language and has brought it back to one of our institutions here. And that's often all we know about a language and nothing else. But languages are the carriers of our knowledge, are the carriers of our social structure, and has evolved over centuries and has adapted to the knowledge. All of you who speak 1, 2, or 3, who speak more than one language, who speak 2, 3, and 4, know how problematic and difficult it is to translate between two languages. What is expressed in a language in one word, you will probably need 3 sentences in another word. Everyone who works on translation knows what an art it is and how complex and difficult it is to translate. Now, this evanescent knowledge, this intangible heritage we have, our human diversity, is going away at a dramatic speed. And we're running against time trying to preserve and to at least document these languages. So what do we lose? We lose entire worldviews encoded in these languages, cosmologies and belief systems, centuries of wisdom of social structure that has evolved in order to survive. Extramarital relationships, Darwinian problems, knowledge about farming and the environment, knowledge about history and tradition, testimonies about atrocious events, testimonies about everything that we as historians, for example, try to describe and understand. This is going away, and we are losing this diversity at a dramatic speed without having any record of it. And this is happening at a time where millions and millions of people are going to the British Museum to look at objects, material culture that was created in these regions, in these places, without the people that created these objects ever having talked to us about it, ever having told us how they used to make it or how they created these things that is embedded in their culture. So I'm from SOAS, and I'm grateful for my colleagues, Mike Hutt and David Pearson and Farzana Whitfield, who brought me here to talk about this. What do we do at SOAS about this? So we, in the Endangered Languages Documentation Project, we give money, we give grants all over the world to linguists and anthropologists, speakers, community members to document these languages, to record the speakers, to record the stories, the rituals, the histories, the mythologies, and the everyday life, and their knowledge about plants, and their knowledge about, how things were 50 years ago or 100 years ago. We train young scholars at SOAS, and we also go out into the regions and train scholars there to do these recordings, to translate and to transcribe the recordings, and to bring them back into our digital archive, where we make the data freely accessible to the entire world. We make these resources available digitally, and we make them available to everyone so that local scholars can access them, that local scholars that don't have the possibility to come to London can use and triangulate, for example, manuscript data with testimony data of speakers that tell you about how things were before the road was built. And you all know what it means when a road is built in a place, when railways were built. So we provide actually what we think about as true scientific inclusion because we enable people to get to these materials and use them. But we also give the speakers a voice to talk about how they do things, how they build boats, how they create this mask, how they used to do the paintings, and how they would, do these rituals and marriage ceremonies, and where this poem comes from, and who used to tell it when they were children. Because it's all oral, there's nothing written. So in our program, we send people out to create audiovisual corpora of language materials. They deposit them with us and make them available and leave also a copy in the country, also with the community members who are there. We strongly believe in capacity building because it's very important that local scholars try or start doing this work, because it's the local scholars that have the best understanding to contextualize the knowledge, and it's their cultural heritage that they want and they should, take care of. So far we have funded over 380 projects worldwide, and we have run over 30 trainings here in London where we invite scholars from all over the world and train them in language documentation techniques, creating digital collections of language corpora. And we have done capacity building trainings in Winneba, in Addis Ababa, in Boya, in Russia, and we just returned from Yunnan. And I have been trying for 4 years to find a university in India that is interested and wants to do this over a long-term project to enable Indian scholars and students to do this work. So far, what you can see here is a map of the projects we have funded and the amount of material we have in our archive. So we have around 60 terabyte, and these are around the 380 projects and the locations where they are. Now, as you can see, we strongly disadvantage Europe, which is positive because they have money themselves. There's no money around in Africa or in South America. We have funded a lot of work in Asia, but you will be surprised how little we have funded in India. Now, why is this dramatic and why is this interesting? You all know about the Grierson survey 100 years ago of languages. When he did the survey, as a governmental worker of the English Empire, he determined that in this region where he did the survey, there's 179 languages and 544 dialects. Now, the interesting thing about these numbers is that it's not clear how he determined what a language and what a dialect is. And don't misunderstand, we linguists also don't really know what it is. The crude measure we have is that we say if there's mutual intelligibility, then it's a dialect. If it's not there, it's not. It's a different language. But it's also a political measure. So, you go to China and you speak to a linguist there and he says, I'm working on a dialect of Miao, and then you understand, oh no, these are all languages. But they're said to be dialects to impose unity, a unity that is not there, and not support the strong diversity in an area. We just returned from Yunnan. I learned so much how diverse it is there. So this is what Grierson said. And the materials of Grierson are in the British Library, and some of them are digitized. And it's incredible what he has done. So now, this is the linguistic areas, roughly. And now if you go and try to get to the sources and try to find out how many languages there are, you will find out that Ethnologue says there are 461 languages, 447 living, and 14 extinct. Wikipedia talks about 22 languages, and the Indian 2001 census about 122 major languages and 1,599 other languages. So, as you can tell, and you might be surprised, we really don't know. We really don't know. And why do we not know? Because the languages have not been studied. We have no idea where they are spoken. We don't know what they are. We don't know if they're dialects. We don't know. So there's so much work to do. And at the same time, these languages go at a dramatic speed, because people ensure that the majority language will be spoken and don't teach their children the language of their elders. What is interesting is that often what happens is that the elders don't teach it. It jumps a generation and the kids come back and say, why can't I talk to my grandmother? Why didn't you teach me the language? I want to learn the language. And it's those kids that then come to our archive and try to study the language or find out and connect to their cultural and linguistic heritage. So, over the past 15 years since our program exists, since 2002, these are the dots you see here are the projects we have funded. And as you can tell, look at Nepal, look at Bhutan, and look at India. 16 over 14 years. If we are conservative, of the 460 languages, this is really nothing. This is really not much. and we really want to do much more. Now, if you think about, these are the languages we have funded, and I will talk about our superstar project. This is the Great Andamanese, and I will tell you about that. What you have in these collections are audio and video recordings of speakers, of elders, of children, of grown-ups that talk about their lives, describe rituals, talk about how things were, oral histories, talk about making things, creating things. So it's a rich resource for not only linguists, because they're talking about their history and their life, their everyday life. We have songs, we have ethnobotany, a knowledge that goes away first because the nature is changing so dramatically, and the wisdom of the local people is now something that environmentalists tap into more and more. We have procedurals. These are things where they explain how they make things, how they create food, how they farm, how they make boats, how they make whatever cultural artifact and object. And the object might be right in the British Museum in an exhibition on something where we don't know anything about it. And here we have someone telling how their grandmother used to make it and how they were taught by their grandmother, and that no one is being taught these things anymore. Marriage ceremony, arts and crafts creation, rituals, their meaning and relevance, testimonies, and everyday conversation. So a rich set of material that is relevant for anthropologists, historians, art history, material culture, development, politics. And where's my friend from the Science Museum? I think we have a lot of interesting things here where people are talking about, how they do things, which is related to exactly your theme and your topic. And it's the people themselves speaking. So it's giving them a voice. I want to show you how this looks like. So this is our SAD digital interface. Discovery, accessibility, user-friendliness is a different topic. But what you can see here, this is a project that was run by Anvita Abi. She is a very prominent Indian scholar. She documented Great Andamanese, which is spoken in the Great Andaman Islands. This is one of the languages where we think it's one of the oldest languages from the time when from Africa people came over to India. That is one of the ideas about this language. And she has, what you can see here is the languages. Here you can see the genres that she has created, and there you can see description of the materials that she has combined in these collections. There's a dictionary, and you all know how relevant and important dictionary are because they have such rich information. She has testimonies about the time when the tsunami hit and what happened and how they dealt with it. And during her project, she also started working with an ornithologist. And the most interesting thing is that they started to record systematically the bird names and the relationship, the linguistic relationship between the bird names, and they mapped it onto the biological classification, and it matched. This is the first collaboration between an ornithologist and a linguist working together in this region, documenting the birds that have never been documented before. Because the biologists also don't know. They're in the same position like we are. For a lot of species, they don't know, and they find out. And the knowledge that is encoded in the languages of the people that live with these animals or live with these plants, we are losing it, and they're golden for the biologists in the same way. During her project, which ran till 2012, from 2007 till 2012, the last speaker of Yero, of Boya Senior, of the language we believe is one of the oldest one, died. She was the last speaker, and we are holding the last recordings. And this is Boya Senior. And I will play a little bit of it where she's being interviewed in Hindi and then also starts playing a song, so you have an idea how some of the materials look like. And it's the last speaker. With her, this language has fallen silent. It's gone. It's only in recorded and in written versions existent. The other part is that she was the last speaker, and when her parents died 40 years ago, from then on she didn't have anybody to talk to in Yero. So these speakers are all multilinguals. They all speak 2, 3, 4 languages. So she had all the other ones. So it was only when the linguists came and told her to speak in this language, to tell the stories in this language, that she was the last time that she spoke the language.
नाली बहुत जोर बारिश का पानी
सीधा मतलब बहुत जोर पानी
एक बार और गा दीजिए बड़ा अच्छा गाना है एक बार और गा दीजिए सीखो
आगे fuera tú 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 आगे fuera tú 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 आगे fuera tú 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 आगे का मतलब
क्या होता मतलब
कोई पानी जाता नीचे
So in India, there was another census, and there is some linguistic work going on, but there's no digital archive for Indian languages. And this is not a linguistic resource. This is a strong resource for all resources to link the manuscripts and the knowledge about artifacts, poetry, as well as philosophy of these small languages, of these regions that are so highly diverse. And the diversity is something that we are losing in an incredible speed. And the documentation of this Indian tradition and this Indian diversity should be done by Indian scholars to protect the linguistic and the cultural heritage. Thank you. Something completely different.